Hey, everybody.
Hey, Dr. Chen.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
Good, good. What's up?
Oh, I was wondering if I could ask you a quick question about the
Sure.
homework.
Sure. What's up?
Okay. For homework number two for 3B,
Hmm.
I was kind of curious. I've already finished it, but I wasn't here for a lecture on Tuesday.
Hmm.
So I was rewatching it, and you said there was two methods you could do to solve for the tuition costs. So like the tuition cost is like 21,500, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
For the last 4 years. And you said that you could do a future to present sum value at year 17, but
Yep.
I did at year 21. And so I'm wondering, why is it like, I don't know, I'm just curious, why is it that both ways can work?
Yeah, because you're basically you're doing two conversions here, right? And so the way you're doing is you pushed it to year 21, and so you use like an F and A conversion, right? F over
Yeah,
A,
yeah,
and then you did a
yeah.
P over F. And so, for the F over A, I think that value is going to be a little bit bigger than the P over A value.
Okay.
Um, um,
Oh, I see.
and then
So
the
if,
other
if
one's going to go down a little bit. And so, you have two constants that you're multiplying by, and then if you do it one way, one goes up, the other goes down, and then
oh,
in
I
the end they end up
understand.
the same thing. Yeah,
Okay, so if I were to use P over A as opposed to F over A, then it would be at the year 17 for the P over F, correct?
correct. Yep. Hmm.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense now.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. Hmm.
Professor,
Yep. Hmm.
I have a quick question about gradient.
Sure.
So we defined in class that it's a situation where recurring cash flows are increasing in value over time. Is there
Yep.
ever a time where it's decreasing over time?
Sure. Yeah, you can have that, and you can just use a negative gradient. Hmm.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hmm. All right, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started today. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, thumbs up, good, good. Hope you guys are doing
Alright.
well.
How about you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, it's end of the week, so I'm excited for the weekend. Okay, so today the plan is to finish up our lecture notes on annual cash flow. Okay, and this is hopefully, and hopefully we get through everything. I think we should. But this is the last topic that I plan on covering before the midterm. Okay, and so I have one more homework that I want you guys to do before the midterm. And so I'm working on it right now, actually, and then I should have that up for you, later this afternoon. And that's going to be due next Friday. Okay. But in terms of topics on the midterm, this is going to be the last one. And so, for the midterm that we're going to take 2 weeks from now, and so it's going to be on Thursday, September 30th. It's only going to cover up to annual cash flow. Yeah. It's going to be a little shorter, and so homework two is a little bit lengthy. And so, first midterm homeworks are always a little bit awkward, just because, first homework is usually fairly light, just because it's the first one of the year. Then the second homework, I tend to go a little bit heavier, just because, there's a lot of content there. And then the last homework before the midterm, I don't want to overload you guys, since I know you guys will be studying at the same time. And so I tend to go a little bit lighter on that. Right. So it's it'll be a little bit lighter than homework 2. So in between homework 2 and homework 1 in terms of the amount of work. Did we talk about the midterm on Tuesday, or do we not? Okay. So I guess it was another class that I talked about it. So the midterm is going to be in 2 weeks, and so it's going to be on Thursday, September 20th, and so that's Thursday of week 6. Okay. Of course, it'll be a completely virtual exam, just because this class is all virtual. Okay. So I'm going to put the questions onto Canvas, and you're going to take the exam through there. Okay. It'll be a timed exam, and so it'll be I'll give you guys 90 minutes to do it, and so from 1 p.m. until 2:30, right? So normally I like to give the exam just during class time, but I know with Zoom and with Canvas and everything, it takes a little bit of time to scan and upload your solution, so I give you an extra 15 minutes for that. Okay. I do plan on doing a review session, and so I always do a review session before the midterm, and it'll be an asynchronous review session. Okay, and so what's going to happen next week is that I'm going to post a poll onto Canvas where you can vote on the topics that we've covered so far that you feel most uncomfortable with, and then from the top 2 or 3 of those, I'll do about an hour and a half long review session that I'll record. I'll put it on YouTube, and then I'll send you guys the link so you can use it to study. Okay. I'll also be making a study guide. A question: how many questions can we expect? So on the exam, you can expect to have 4 short answer questions. Okay. And so those will be very similar to the homeworks, where I ask you to basically answer something within a couple sentences. And then there will be 3 kind of computation type questions, where I ask you to find the present worth, or maybe annual cash flow, or ask you to do some conversions for cash flows. Yeah, it'll be open notes, open book. The only thing is it's not open person, and so the only thing that I ask is that you don't collaborate with your friends. Okay. Normally for the homeworks, I don't mind if you work together with people, but the purpose of the exam is for assessment, right? And so I need to kind of see where each of you individually are in the class. And so the only way that works is if you do the exam on your own. Okay? And so feel free to study together with people. Feel free to work on the homeworks together with other people. But for the exam, I don't want to see no activity on the Discord. Please don't talk to your friends on the phone or anything like that during the exam. Okay. Study guide. So I will be posting a study guide next week too. And the study guide will list basically all the topics and all the learning objectives that I'm going to expect you guys to know for the exam. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. And so, are there any questions I can answer about the exam or anything else? Okay. All right. Remember, homework 2 is due tonight, and so homework 2 is going to be due at 11:59 p.m. tonight. And so, make sure you get that in, before midday. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue on our lecture notes. Okay. Right. And we were covering annual cash flow analysis. Okay. All right, and so remember, annual cash flow analysis is kind of like the sister to present worth analysis, and that we're basically doing the same thing, right? So remember, the idea with annual cash flow is that we're going to use it to choose between economic alternatives. Because a very common situation that you'll come across is that you'll have multiple vendors or multiple different options for your engineering projects, and you need a way to kind of choose which one is going to be the best option for you to go with. Okay, and so we've done present worth, where we've converted all of the cash flows for a given option into a present sum. In annual cash flow analysis, we're just converting everything to a uniform series. Okay. Okay. And so one big advantage that annual cash flow analysis has over present worth is that it works really well for cases where the product lives don't match up, right? And so if you remember from present worth analysis, if you had a situation where you're comparing two options, but their product lives may not match up together, right? You had to do a little bit of extra work where you had to kind of extend the lives until you reach kind of a least common multiple between them. Okay. And so for annual cash flow analysis, you don't have to do that, given this kind of key assumption. Okay. Okay, so let's say it works great. When product lives differ. Okay. Given that, right? Given that we assume that the product that we're buying is going to be used for a very long period of time. Okay. And that we can buy replacements, whenever we need to at the same price. Okay. All right, and so this works even when the least common multiple between the two lives are very high. Okay, so let's do just a very quick example just to show you that this works really well, and even in kind of a situation that might seem like it's really inconvenient. Okay. All right, and so let's say that we're considering two different options, in this case, two different pumps. Okay, and let's say that pump A. Okay, so let's say that pump A has an initial cost of $7,000. Okay. In addition to that, it's we're going to ignore any maintenance costs, and we're going to assume that the pump A can be salvaged for $1,200 at the end of 12 years. Okay. Okay, so we have a $1,200 salvage. And the product life for pump A is going to be 12 years. Okay. Pump B, on the other hand, will have an initial cost of $5,000. Okay. It has a salvage value of $1,000. Okay. And the life for pump B is going to be 9 years. Okay. And so we have two different products here, with two different costs associated with it, and two different lives. Okay. But their lives aren't really that convenient, right? And so if you compute the least common multiple between these two, I think it's going to be 36 years. Okay. And so if you wanted to, do this with present worth, you'd have to run this up for 36 years. But with annual cash flow, we can just use these numbers here kind of directly and just compute a uniform series representation for both of them. Okay. And so I'll do that on the next page just to show you how simple it is. And then, we'll move on from there. Okay. Okay. So any questions on this?
Professor, I had a question.
Sure. What's up?
From the previous lecture, you said to use this, the least common multiple has to be at least reasonable in order to use this. Do you have a indication for when a reasonable LCM would be to use this analysis?
Yeah. So that refers to present worth analysis. And so for present worth, the least common multiple has to be reasonable because you're gonna basically extend the analysis up until that point. But in annual cash flow analysis, you don't have to. And so what I'll show you here is that you can just use the numbers that we have here without having to worry about how far we're going to extend it. Okay. As for what's reasonable or not, it kind of depends on the situation. And so a lot of times your gut or your intuition will serve you pretty well, right? And so for this case, we have a least common multiple. Let's say that we want to do this case with present worth. And so, the least common multiple between these two is going to be 36 years. And 36 years, that's almost an entire person's, whole career. And so if you can imagine using the same pump and same device for 36 years, without any improvements to the pump over that time, then, that's not something that I would expect. And so normally, I would expect, maybe a better pump will come out one day. The pump will just come out of service one day, right? Because if you can assume that you can buy the same pump, today as in 2050, that's pretty unlikely because companies go out of business and companies that stay, they come up with new models for their pumps, and it's something long like that is not a fair assumption. So you kind of have to use your intuition a little bit about how long are you reasonably going to use this product or service.
Thank you.
Okay, and so let's do this analysis using annual cash flow, and we'll see that it's fairly simple. Right? All right, and so let's compute the EUAW, or the equivalent uniform annual worth for option A. Okay, and so we're going to convert everything into a uniform series. Okay, and so first we have our initial cost for $7,000. Okay, and to convert this to a uniform series, we need an A over P. 7% and 12. Okay. Then we have our salvage value. Our salvage value is 1,200. And this is going to be an A over F, 7% and 12. Okay. And so this is going to give us minus $814. Okay. You plug in the values from the compound interest table. Right, so notice that we just used 12, which was the life of the first pump, right? And so we didn't have to extend this for up to 36 years. Okay, and now let's do pump B. So for pump B, we have minus 5,000. Okay, A over P, 7%. Okay, in this case, we're going to use 9 because 9 is the amount of years that it's going to last. Okay. Right, then we're going to add 1,000, A over F, 7% and 9. Okay, and this is going to be A minus $684. Okay, and so in this case, we're mostly just given costs, and so I know that we have the salvage value, but the salvage value, you're not really making any revenue from that, and so we want to pick the equivalent uniform annual worth that's the least negative. And so in this case, that's going to be pump B. Okay. 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 Any questions on this? Okay. All right. And so, when you have products that have a differing product lives like this, your calculation is going to be a little bit more convenient when you use annual cash flow analysis versus present worth. Okay. You'll get the same, you'll get the same result either way, or at least you should. Okay. And so if you wanted to do this problem with present worth analysis, assuming that you do run it up to 36 years, you should get the same result, that pump B is the better way to go. It's just that annual cash flow analysis, it's just a little bit more convenient because you have, a little bit less calculations, a little bit less things to look up in the table, right? But both ways are completely valid. And so, if I gave you a problem like this on the exam, and you chose to do it with present worth versus annual cash flow, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't dock any points for that. It's just that you're just gonna be doing just a little bit more work than otherwise. Okay. Okay. And so let's talk about a little bit of a more specialized situation. And so let's look at some situations where we have what's called an infinite useful life. And so these are situations where you're considering an alternative, or you're considering an option for either a product or a construction that's in theory never has to be replaced. Okay. Okay. And so oftentimes these are things like public works projects, right? And so if you're constructing like a new road or a new tunnel, right? And so you're not going to replace the road. You're going to service it every now and then, but you're never going to rip it out and put in a new road there. Okay. And so a lot of government projects, construction, public works projects kind of fall into this category. Okay. And so in these situations, it can be a little bit difficult to determine what the EUAW is, right? Okay. And the reason for this is that, basically the end value, or the number of years, is going to be infinity, right? And so if you were to try, right, and so let's consider a case where we're just considering the cost, right? And so if we try to compute the equivalent uniform annual cost for something that has an infinite life, you're basically trying to do something like this. We have P, we have A over P, I, and then infinity. Okay. Right. And so if you look at your compound interest tables, there's no number for infinity. And so it actually, the compound interest table actually go up to 100, but doesn't even go beyond that. And even if you went to try to use the equations, if you try to put infinity in for n, you're not going to get a defined number. It's going to be undefined. Okay. And so for these problems, where a lot of these are like I said, public works projects where you're going to pay a lot of money up front to just to build the thing, but but it's going to be used forever, and so it's not like you have to buy a new one later on. Okay. It can be difficult to determine what the equivalent uniform annual cost is. Okay. And so for these situations where the where you have basically an infinite time horizon, okay, in these situations, it helps to use the concept of capitalized cost. And so remember, we talked about capitalized costs in the previous unit, right? And so capitalized costs is this idea of, you have a very large sum of money, and then each year, you're kind of collecting that money. You're collecting the interest rate on that large sum, and then we're assuming that to be kind of your uniform series. Okay. And so instead of computing an EUAC using the compound interest tables, what you can say instead is that the uniform series, okay, the uniform series amount for a product with a infinite horizon can be found just by taking the product of the interest rate and the initial cost. Okay. Right. And so instead of using this top equation, okay, we're going to use this one here instead. Okay. Right. And so I'll do an example next, just kind of show you when you would use this. Okay. But basically, whenever you have a situation where the problem tells you that it's going to be permanent or the useful life is infinite, right, and so it's never going to be replaced, the way that you can compute your equivalent uniform annual cost or your uniform series is to use a capitalized cost formula right here. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this before we jump into an example? Okay. Okay, and so let's do an example real quick. Okay, and so let's say that LA County, they're considering the expansion to one of their aqueducts. Okay. If my freaking stylus would cooperate, LA, okay, County, expanding their aqueducts. Okay, and so there's two options that they're considering. Okay, right, and so one option is for them to build a tunnel through the mountains. Okay. And so the other one is to build a pipe that goes around the mountains. Okay. Okay. All right. Question? All right. And so, both of these have a certain initial cost. Okay. And so that's going to be the first row in our table here. And so to dig a tunnel through the mountains, it's going to have an initial cost of 5.5 million. Okay. But to build a pipe around the mountains, it's going to cost $5 million. Okay. All right, maintenance costs. There are no maintenance costs, and so we're going to assume that once these things are built, they can be maintained without any costs. Okay, and so we're not going to consider that. Okay. All right, and same thing for the salvage value. And so we're basically going to assume that since these are kind of long-standing structures, no one's going to want to buy them afterwards, and so we're going to say the salvage values are 0. Okay. All right, and so where these two options are going to differ is from their useful life. Okay. And so if we dig a tunnel through the mountains, or we blow it up, or whatever method that they use, we're going to assume that this tunnel is going to be permanent. Okay. Right. And so we blow up the mountain once, and then we don't have to do it again. Right. Versus if we go with the pipe option, the pipe will eventually have to be replaced, because we're going to assume that the pipe is going to rust and it's going to eventually become not serviceable. Okay. And so if we go with the pipe option, this has to be replaced every 50 years. Okay. So it's still pretty long. All right. And so if we assume an interest rate of 6%, okay, right? And so if our interest rate is 6%, let's use annual cash flow analysis to determine, which one is the better option to go with. Okay. All right. Any questions on the setup for the problem? Okay. All right. And so let's go ahead and start working on it. Okay. All right. And so let's start with the let's start with the tunnel. Okay. And so we're going to compute the EUAW for both options. Okay. And so the EUAW for the tunnel. Okay. Since this tunnel here is going to be permanent, right? So there's no way that we can use the compound interest tables to convert this. Okay. And so for this option, we need to rely on capitalized cost. Okay. Right. And so we're going to take the interest rate and we're just going to multiply it by the initial cost, right? And so our interest rate is 0.06 for 6%. Okay. And we're going to multiply that by 5.5 million. Okay. And so this gives us a cost of minus $330,000. Okay. Right. And so going with the tunnel option is almost like paying out $330,000 each year. Okay. All right. And so now let's go with the pipeline. And so the pipeline does have a finite amount of life. And so with this, you can use the compound interest tables. Okay. And so for this one, we can just do the simple conversion. Okay. So we're going to do 5 million. And then we're going to convert this to an A. Right? And so it's going to be A over P, 6%, and 50 years. Okay. We can look up that value in the table. And what we get is minus $317,000. And so since this, the EUAW for the pipeline is less negative, then this is the one that we're going to go with. Okay. And so LA County should build the tunnel or build the pipe around the mountains. Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Yeah. If only there was a One Punch Man in reality, then then they can do that. Yeah, if anime logic worked in real life, it would save a lot of money. But we'd also have a lot more problems too. Yeah. Question. So why does the mountain tunneling get no rust? That's a great question. That's a great question that goes beyond the scope of an economics class. So if we were kind of a fluids pipings class, I think we'd I'd have a better answer to that. But for this is it was just kind of an example for capitalized costs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and so that's how you deal with situations when the useful life is infinity. Okay, and so now let's look at some options where, or let's look at situations where the useful life is something else, right? And so we're kind of in an awkward space. Okay, and so I call this cases when you have some other analysis period. Okay. All right. And so you might come across situations, when you're trying to do annual cash flow, where the useful lives, are a little bit strange. Okay. Because remember, the assumption that we were working with before was that, we were going to keep using this part, at least for the foreseeable future. Okay. But there are definitely some situations out there where for sure that you're only going to use this part or this product for a certain amount of time. Okay. And a lot of times, the useful lives of the products don't match up with how long you want to use the part. Okay. Okay. Right. So there are a lot of situations where the useful life doesn't match the amount of time that we want to use the product, and we can't apply our same assumptions before. Okay. And so as an example, and we'll actually run the numbers for this one. And so let's say that you know that you're going to use a product for 10 years. Okay. And so after 10 years, you're not going to use it anymore. But the only options available to you is an option that lasts for 7 years and another one that lasts for 13 years. Okay. And so, we can't apply the same assumptions as before because we know for sure, that we're only going to use it for 10 years, right? And so you can't make the assumption that, we're going to keep buying replacements up until, you can't anymore, okay? All right, and so this is, we came across a situation in present worth analysis, right? And so in these situations in present worth, right, we're going to have to do what's called an early salvage of these products, okay? Right. Because we're gonna be salvaging these pieces of equipment or getting rid of them before they reach kind of the end of their life, right? And so with these situations, remember that a big part of them is that we have to estimate, or we have to kind of guess. We have to make an educated guess of what the early salvage value is going to be, right? And a lot of times that's not easy. And so a lot of times that depends on what the market is at the time. It depends on the state of the product at the time, right? And so a lot of times these are kind of difficult to do, okay? Especially for annual cash flow analysis where it's even more kind of awkward, I would say, okay? And so in these situations where you kind of have an irregular kind of situation where you have early salvage values where you might not know what they are, right? Sometimes the best thing that you can do is to kind of set up an equation, okay? Set up an equation that you can represent symbolically, and then someone else with more kind of knowledge of the pricing can fill it in later. Okay? And so we're going to do an example of that on the next page. Okay. All right. So any questions before we move forward? Okay, so let's do an example of this. All right, and so in this example, let's say that we are, considering the purchase of a production machine. Okay, and that production machine will be used for exactly 10 years. Okay. Okay. All right, and so we have two options. Okay, so we have option A. Okay. And so option A, let's say that, and we're going to do this all symbolically. So we're not going to have any numbers here. Okay. And so let's say option A has a initial cost of P sub A. Okay. Okay. And it also has an end of life salvage value of F sub A. Okay. And so this is its end of life salvage. Okay. And the useful life for A is going to be 7 years. Okay. So N sub A is equal to 7 years. Okay. Okay. All right. And so option B will also have its own initial cost and salvage value. Okay. And we're just going to leave those in terms of symbols. Okay. Okay. And so we have P sub B, that's going to be the initial cost. And then F sub B is going to be its end of life salvage. Okay. And then let's say that option B will have a useful life of 13 years. Okay. Okay. All right. And so if we assume an interest rate of 8%, right? Let's set up the equations to compute the EUAW for both of these options. Okay. Okay. All right, and so let's start with A, right? And so A, we know has a useful life of 7 years. Okay, and so in order for it to reach up to 10 years, we're going to need to buy a replacement in year 7. Okay. Right, and so the cash flow diagram looks something like this. Okay. All right. And so initially we're going to purchase option A, and so this is going to be P sub A right here. Okay. Then we have another P sub A in year 7, because that's when we need to buy a new one. Okay. Right. And then year 7, we're going to salvage that first one, and so we're going to have an F sub A here. Okay. And then at the end, we're going to salvage the second option that, or the second purchase that we did, okay? But we're going to salvage it at a certain time that's not end of life, right? And so we don't know what that is. And so we have another salvage value here, but it's going to be different than the end of life salvage value. And so I'm just going to label it as F3A, okay? And so F3A here represents, the amount of salvage that we'll get by salvaging the first option at the end of, after 3 years of use, okay? And so we don't know what that is, but that's okay. And so, all we're concerned about here is just setting up an equation for EUAW, and then someone who is more knowledgeable about how these machines work can fill that in for us later, okay? All right, any questions on this before we compute the EUAW? Okay. All right. Oh, and actually, before we do that, let me kind of make note here. Okay. And so here we kind of have what's basically, it basically looks like an overhaul cost, right? And so if we want to convert this to a uniform series, this is going to be a non-standard conversion. So we need to do this in 2 steps. Okay. Yes, yeah, the 3A indicates 3 years. Yes. Okay. Right, because if we try to convert these two guys, this FA and this PA to a uniform series in one shot, right? And so let's say if we use an F over A factor or A over F factor, right? Then what that's going to do is that it's going to spread out all of the recurring costs only between years 1 and 7, okay? And we don't want that, and so we want to spread this out over all 10 years. And so we have to do a non-standard conversion for this guy. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and write that out. Okay. So the EUAW of option A, this is going to be minus PA. Okay. And so the PA, in order to stretch this out to 10 years, it's going to be an A over P factor, right? 8%, 10 years. Okay. Plus, now let's do the non-standard conversion. And so the non-standard conversion will be an FA minus PA. Okay. And so both of these are future amounts that occur in year 7. Okay. And so in order to get a uniform series amount that goes across all 10 years, first let's take this and convert it to a present day sum. Okay. And so let's apply a P over F, 8% and 7 years. Okay. And so we're moving the this amount of money back to the present day. Okay. Then we're going to convert this to a uniform series across 10 years, right? And so we're going to apply the same A over P, 8% and 10 years. Okay. Right. Does that make sense how we or why we did that and how we did that? Okay.
Professor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you show the second term with the diagram? I think I got a little lost.
Yeah. So the second term is this one right here, this FA and PA on year 7. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move this back to year 0, right? And so this is going to be our P over F factor, right? Okay. And then after we move that back to year 0, we're going to spread this out over all 10 years using an A over P, okay? And so the A over P, is going to spread it out over all 10 years just like this, okay? Because ultimately we want a uniform series that spreads across all 10 years, okay? And so those are the 2 conversions that I did for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so the last cash flow that we have is the future sum in year 3. Okay. Right. And so that's going to be F3A. Okay. Since this is occurring, I'm sorry, this is the salvage value after 3 years of use, but this is going to be at year 10. Okay. And so since this is already at the very end of our cash flow diagram, we can just convert this straight up to a uniform series, right? And so this is going to be A over F, 8% and 10. Okay. And so, we can fill in everything in this equation except for the cash flow amounts, okay? And so what we're going to get is a variable relationship, right? And so EUAW of A is going to be equal to minus 0.236 times P sub A, okay, plus 0.087 F sub A, okay, plus 0.069 F3A. Okay. Okay. Right, and so all we've done here is that we basically set up the equation so that someone can come fill this in later on with the with the appropriate cash amounts. Okay. Okay, and so that's option A. Option B is actually a little bit simpler, and so I'm not going to draw the cash flow diagram for option B. Okay, because option B it has a useful life of 13 years. Okay, and so we never have to buy a replacement for option B, but we will have to salvage early. And so I'll say that, salvage early at year 10. Okay. All right, and so the EUAW for option B is going to be simply minus PB A over P. Okay. And so this is the initial cost here. And so we're spreading out the initial cost over all 10 years. Okay. And so we have an A over P factor, 8%. Okay. And 10 years. Okay. Plus we have an unknown salvage value, right? Because we don't know how much that option B is going to be worth after 10 years. And so we'll leave it as a variable. F10, I'll call it F10B. Okay. Okay, and this is going to be A over F, 8% and 10 years. Okay. And so we fill in the values from the table, and what we get is minus 0.149 P sub B plus 0.069 F10B. Okay. Okay. And so from here, it's you can't actually determine which one's better, because of course it's going to depend on what you input for the prices for everything. But at least you set up the equations, okay? And so now you can pass this to the next person, someone who knows the prices, and you can fill those in very, very simply. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. All right. And so one of the problems on homework 3 is going to be something similar to this, where I'm going to give you a situation where you're going to have to salvage early for one option or the other one, and then you need to determine which salvage value you can use. Okay. And so in the homework problem, I'm going to give you two options, and so I say if you salvage before year 3, and so if you use this product for 3 years or less, then you can salvage it for a certain amount. But if you use it for more than 3 years, then you have to salvage it for a lesser amount. Okay. And so setting it up as an equation like this will really help, because then it'll help you plug in the correct salvage values for that. Okay. Okay. And so now let's move on to the last topic in annual cash flow, and that's the idea of paying back a loan. Okay. Or in other words, what we're going to learn is how to build an amortization schedule. Okay. All right. And so, this is a topic that I kind of picked just because it's of course it's useful in engineering whenever you have to take out a loan, but I think this is also something useful in personal life too, because I've taken out tons of loans in my life, and being able to organize your payments and to kind of see where you stand on the loan is something that's really, really useful. Okay, and so let's start by saying that one of the most common uses for a uniform series payment is paying back a loan. Okay. Okay. Right. And so, of course, this is used professionally, but it's also used by a lot of individuals as well. Okay. And so a useful tool to help you kind of organize your payments and to keep track of everything is known as an amortization schedule. Okay. And so basically what an amortization schedule is it's a spreadsheet, or it's a table that basically keeps track of, how much of basically everything you need to know about a loan. Okay. Okay. And so it'll help keep track of things like how much balance you have remaining, how much you've paid in interest so far, and how much of your payments are going towards your principal. Okay. And so all of those words, will make sense kind of as we introduce it. Okay. All right, and the knowledge that we've gained from this section and just from uniform series in general will be useful. Okay? All right, and so let me give you a template for what a typical amortization schedule looks like. Okay? Okay. Right. And so traditionally these amortization schedules are made in some kind of spreadsheet program. And so there's Microsoft Excel, there's Google Sheets, right? And so I think that's what makes it, those programs make it pretty convenient to make something like this. But you can also do it by hand too. And that's not it's actually not that bad. Okay. And so usually at the top of an amortization schedule, you'll have 4 important pieces of information. Okay. Right. And so the first piece of information that you'll have is the initial balance. Okay. Okay. And so the initial balance is simply just, how much money that you borrowed upfront. Okay. And so if you're borrowing money to, purchase a house or a car, that's going to be, whatever the price of that object is. Okay. Right. And so next you have the interest rate. Okay. And so that's the interest rate you're paying on the loan. Okay. Next, you have the number of payments, or the number of periods that you're going to be using to pay back the loan. A lot of times this is going to be, how many months you're going to pay back the loan in, or how many years. Okay. Okay. And the last thing and the last piece of information in this this header section is how much you're paying per month. Okay. And so, I know all the examples that we've done so far, the periods have been years, but traditionally, when you pay back a loan, you usually pay that in monthly installments, right? So there's some loans that you pay, once a year or something like that, but usually it's a monthly amount. Okay. And so that doesn't change anything in our analysis. And so we're still going to use whole values of n. And just know that the n's for these represent months instead of years. Okay. Right. And so usually what you're going to do is you're going to input your information here, right? And so you're going to input whatever your initial balance is. Okay. You're going to input your interest rate. Okay. And you're going to input how many payments that you're going to make, or at least you plan to make. And then all three of these informations are going to be used to compute how much you need to pay each month. Okay. And we're going to use the compound interest table to support that. Okay. So any questions on this? Okay. Okay. And so that's the top section of an amortization schedule. And so now let's go over what the rest of the table looks like. And so this is where it gets into kind of a spreadsheet. Okay. And so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different columns here. And so first thing is you're going to have a column for the period. And so that just tells you, whatever month that you're on. Okay. Okay. Next, you have a column for the beginning balance. Okay. And so whatever the balance for that month is. Okay. And so that's what you're going to put there. Next, you're going to put in how much you're going to pay in interest that year. Okay. And so this is not the interest rate. This is actually how much interest you're paying in dollar amounts, on that month. Okay. Okay. The next column is principal paid. And so principal paid is going to be how much of your monthly payment is actually going towards paying off the loan. Okay. Because each month that you pay back a loan, right? And so you're paying a set amount each month. A portion of that is going to be used to pay for interest, and the other portion of that is actually going to be used to pay off the balance, right? And so the balance, the principal paid is, how much of your payment is actually going towards paying off the loan. Okay. And then finally, we have the ending balance. And so at the end of this period, or at the end of this month, after you made your payment, the ending balance is how much money that you have left on the loan. Okay. All right, and we'll work, and I'll walk through kind of a big an example of this, just to kind of show you how to do each of these parts. Okay. Because I think walking it through by hand, I think makes it, a lot more clear. Because from this, it's maybe not so quick. Okay. Okay. And so actually, let's dive into each of these columns right now, and then let's talk about how you would actually compute that for a given period. Okay. Right. So actually, period. Let me just go ahead and list these out. Okay. And so period is just gonna count up from 1 to 5. Okay. All right. And so let's actually start to fill in some formulas here for how you would actually compute these things. Okay. Right. And so first, let's start by computing how much you're going to pay on this loan, right? And so on the previous page, we had our initial balance, our interest rate, and the number of periods, okay? And then we're going to use these to compute how much we're going to pay each month. Okay. And so the way that you compute that is you actually use your compound interest table, right? And so your uniform payment amount is going to be A. Okay. And then the way you're going to compute it is you're going to take P, where P here is your initial balance. Okay. Right. Right. And so your initial balance is a present sum of money. Okay. And so you want to convert that into a uniform series. And so we need an A over P conversion factor. Okay. You're going to factor in your interest rate. And then you're going to plug in the number of periods. Okay. Okay. Right. And so, this is exactly the same kind of conversion that we're doing before, except now you're using to compute, how much you're going to pay back on a loan each month. Okay. All right. All right. And so now let's go through each of the columns here and state, how you're going to, compute them. Okay. And so the period, you don't need to compute that. That's just, counting up the periods from 1 to, however many periods you're going to do. Okay. The beginning balance, the way that you start your beginning balance here is that for period 1, you're going to put your initial balance here. Okay. Okay. Because at the very beginning of the loan, you haven't repaid anything yet, and so your beginning balance at the first month is just going to be whatever your initial balance is. Okay. And then this is going to go down as you go down into the table. Right? All right, so let's talk about interest. Okay. The interest represents how much of your monthly payment is going to be going towards paying the interest. Okay. And the way that you compute this is that you simply take whatever your beginning balance is for that period. Whatever your beginning balance is, and then you're going to multiply that by your interest rate. Okay. Okay. Right, and so that's how much interest you're going to pay on that year. Okay. Once you've computed your interest, the way that you compute your principal paid is that you take whatever your uniform monthly payment amount is, and you subtract the interest from that. Okay. Okay. Right. And so the way you can think of it as, when you submit your uniform monthly payments each month, right, a chunk of that is going to be going towards paying whatever interest is, and then whatever's left, that's going to be used to actually pay off your loan. Okay. Right. And then the last quantity that we have here is the ending balance. And remember, the ending balance is how much money that you have left on the loan after you made a payment for that period. Okay. And so the way that you compute this is you simply take your beginning balance and you subtract the principal paid from that period. Okay. Okay. Right. And so that's going to give you your ending balance for that period. Okay. And so that completes an entire row of the amortization schedule, right? And so once you complete that row, then the next step is to take your ending balance from the previous period And then that becomes your beginning balance on the next period. Okay. And so the way you kind of proceed on this table is you kind of go from left to right, kind of, for each row, right? And you start with the initial balance for the first period. Then you compute the interest rate or the interest payment. Then you compute the principal paid. From that, you get your ending balance. And then whatever your ending balance is for that period, you then move it down as the beginning balance of the next one. Okay. And then you keep doing this pattern all the way to the bottom. And then hopefully by the time you get to the bottom, your loan will be paid off and your ending balance will be zero if you did everything correct. Okay. All right. And so I think we have enough time for one quick example before we head out for today. Okay. There is a tiny little bit after the example, but we'll cover that at the beginning of next week. Okay. Yeah. So actually, this process is very similar to doing the compound interest tables that we were, or the compound interest examples that we're doing at the very beginning. Before we learned about the formulas and the compound interest table and stuff like that. Yeah. Except this kind of formalizes each column into separate things. And so is the bottom cut off a bit? I'll write what I have on the bottom on the next page, just so just because I know for some people the bottom is cut off. Yeah. All right. Any other questions on this before we do an example? And I rewrite the formula for ending balance. Okay. So let me go ahead and rewrite that formula. Okay. And so the formula at the bottom, in case you didn't see it, is basically saying that ending balance is equal to whatever your beginning balance was minus principal paid. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's do an example. All right, so let's say that you recently purchased a new piece of furniture. Okay, and this piece of furniture costs $2,400. Right, and so let's say that you don't have $2,400 on you, and so you're going to pay this off using 4 uniform monthly payments. Okay. All right, and so the store agrees to this, right? And so they said, that's fine. We'll let you do that, but they're going to charge you an interest rate of let's say 1%, because in the notes I have 0.25%, but 0.25% is nothing. And so let's do this example with interest rate of 1%. And so for this problem, let's build the amortization schedule for this loan repayment. Okay. All right, and so first let's start by writing the header information. Okay. Right, and so we're going to need to fill in things like the initial balance, the interest rate, okay. The number of payments, okay. And then the monthly payment amount. right? And so these are kind of I would call them kind of the parameters of the month, okay? All right, and so our initial balance here is going to be the cost of the furniture. And so the initial balance is going to be $2,400 because that's how much we're borrowing. Okay. The interest rate here is 1%. Okay. The number of payments is 4, right? And so we want to make 4 monthly payments. Right, and the uniform monthly payment amount is going to be our initial cost, which is $2,400, converted to a uniform series. And so we have A over P, 1%, and 4. Okay. And so since I'm doing this example kind of live, let me go ahead and look up the conversion factor in the table. Okay. And so if we look at the compound interest tables for 1%, we look at the A over P factor for n is equal to 4, and what we get is a value of 0.2563. Okay. And so we perform that arithmetic, and so we do 2,400 times 0.2563, and we get a uniform monthly payment amount of $615.12. Okay. And so that's how much we're going to pay each month for 4 months to pay off this this piece of furniture. Okay. Okay. And so now that we have that information out of the way, let's go ahead and start building the table, right? So let's go ahead and write our columns. Okay. Okay. All right, and so let's start with the first month. Okay. All right, so this is going to be period 1. Okay. And so the beginning balance at the end of the or for the first month is going to be 2,400, right? Because we haven't paid anything off yet. Okay. Our interest payments for that first month is going to be 2,400 times the interest rate, which is going to be 0.01. Okay. And so this is going to be $24. Okay. The principal paid is going to be our $615, right? Because that's how much we're paying each month, minus 24, okay? Because that's how much we're paying in interest. And so if we do that, and so we do 615 minus 24, then our principal paid for that month is going to be $519 or $591.12. Okay. And then our ending balance here, this is simply going to be our 2,400, which was our beginning balance for that month, minus our principal paid. Okay, so minus 591.12. Okay. So this tells us that at the end of the first month, our ending balance is going to be 1808 and 90 or 88 cents. Okay. Right. And so that's the amortization schedule for month 1. Okay. And so now we can go on to month 2. Okay. And so for month 2, we're going to start with a balance of 1,808 and 88 cents. Okay. And then we're just going to do the same thing all over again, right? And so now we're going to take 1% of 1808, and so this is going to be $18.08 or 9 cents. Okay. Our principal paid is going to be our $615 minus the 1809. Let me finish up this row right here, and then we'll call it a day. Right? And so our principal paid for that month is going to be $615 minus 18.09, And so this is going to be 597.03. Okay. And then our ending balance for that month is going to be 1808.88 minus 597.03. Okay. So this is going to be 1211.90. Okay. Okay. And then we can repeat that process over again. And so that $1,211.90, that becomes the beginning balance for year 3, and so on and so forth. Okay. And if you continue this for the next 2 months, what you'll see is that your ending balance at the end of month 4 should be 0. Okay. All right, any final questions on this before we wrap up for the week?
Where it says 615.125, what's the number next to it? Or is it 1.125? I'm just having a hard time reading it.
Wait, which one?
It's at the bottom right in blue. 600.
Oh, yeah, it's 615.12 minus 24.
Minus 24, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's representing that the principal paid is going to be our normal monthly payment amount minus the interest for that. And so that was for the first month. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. And so on Tuesday, I'll go ahead and finish this up, but you should be good to go for the homework that I'm going to post later today. Okay. All right, so have a great weekend, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you guys for tuning in as usual, and I'll see you next week.
Have a good week, Professor.
Thanks, you too.
Professor,
Yep.
just a quick question on the mountain tunneling one more time. I
Yep.
know that in this class you said it was permanent, but it won't rust, but it would rust, right?
Yeah, yeah. In reality, I would expect that, yeah, it would.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you guys have any more questions? Chris, Ryan?
Professor,
Yeah.
for homework 2, I had a question on problem 3B.
Okay.
So I think we went over this last class, or like the beginning, like how to set it up. But for G, that's starting in year 9, we have to convert P to 2 conversions.
Yeah.
What were the conversions? Like I had the had it set up as that's right. So for 3B, set up as so for G, it's P over G of 8% for 9 years. And then you multiply that P over F, or
Yep.
with 8% over 8 years.
You're close.
Or-
So so a lot of people are I think this is what most people are doing for their first go around. So actually, let me pull up my solutions just to make sure I don't say anything incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah. So the key here is kind of taking into account what year what year everything starts, right? And so it's true that the prices or the contribution amounts are starting to increase on year 9, right? And so that's what the problem says. But remember, for an arithmetic gradient, the first year 1 is always going to be blank, right? And so if we kind of draw a line right here, so we start with 9. And so I make actually 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? And so the amounts are actually starting to increase on this year, right? And so it looks something like this, right?
Mhm.
But when you move it back to a P over G, you need to count this first blank year as well. And so, when you actually convert this, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? 9 years where it's actually increasing. But then for a gradient, you actually have to count this year as well. And so instead of 9 right here, this should be 10. Yeah. Mhm. And then this is going to shift this one over too. Instead of 8, this is going to be 7.
9 or 7.
Yeah, because when you convert this, it goes on to the one right before this, which would be like it's year 0 for that one. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
And then so I have it set up as G times that equation is equal to P plus A of P over A of 8% times 6. And then
yeah.
you multiply that by P over F. Or
Yeah. So that's another area where I think, and this is my fault too. I kind of worded it kind of poorly, but this increasing that we're having here for G, this is on top of the $2,000 that they're already contributing. And so what I was trying to communicate in the problem was that the amount that they're contributing is $2,000 from years 3 through 8. But there's still, but the $2,000 is still there for 9 through 17 too. And so when you do the P over A for the $2,000, it should be for 15 years, not for 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then the G is from 9 through 17.
Correct. Yes.
Or from 8 through 17, right?
Correct.
Or,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's the year that's blank. That's okay. So then it'll be 15 years, and then you still convert that P over F, or
Yep. Mm-hmm.
so it'd be P over F of 3% or of 8% for 2 years, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, and then so that would change. So that would be like the full equation, or is there another? Oh, wait, there's another uniform series, right? Which is the
that's the tuition. That's the tuition cost at the very end.
Yeah, at the very end. So it'd be minus A of P over A 8% for 4 years, and then convert that P over F 3% at 17.
Yep. Perfect.
17 years.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, got it. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep. No problem.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
That's it.
Bye.